All right, strap in, everyone. We're going deep today. Nietzsche. Thus spoke Zarathustra. Not exactly light reading, right?
It's definitely not beach material.
Hmm.
But that's Nietzsche for you. Challenging, provocative, makes you think.
Okay, so let's unpack this. You've given us these excerpts, and I'm already intrigued. It's a lot to digest. What I love about this show is that we're not just going to, define terms, right?
Right.
We're going to figure out why these excerpts hit home for you, the listener, and maybe even how they apply to, actual life.
Exactly.
So first things first, we have this character, the Zarathustra.
Hmm.
Kind of prophet-like. What's his deal?
He's like, a philosopher, but with superhero vibes. Descends from the mountains, shakes things up. Except, unlike the historical Zoroaster, this Zarathustra is all Nietzsche. His mouthpiece for some radical ideas.
Uh-huh. And speaking of radical, we can't avoid the big one. God is dead. Like the Nietzsche quote, but I feel like people throw it around without really getting what he meant.
Yeah, it's one of the most misunderstood phrases ever, probably. Not about a literal death, more like Nietzsche saying the old ways of thinking, the ones based on blind faith, authority, you never question, they're just not cutting it anymore. We need something new.
So if God is dead, what fills that void? In these excerpts, there's this Superman figure, but I'm guessing no tights and a cape, right?
Definitely not the comic book kind. Nietzsche's Superman, or Overman, sometimes it's translated, is about pushing human potential to the absolute max, recognizing that the old rules, morality as we knew it, maybe it's not serving us anymore. The Superman creates their own values.
Okay, now I see why this book ruffled some feathers. It's like turning everything we thought we knew upside down. And there's this one part, the Superman is described as lightning and frenzy, intense. What's with that imagery?
Well, lightning, it destroys, right? Breaks things down. But it also illuminates, reveals what was hidden. And frenzy, that's passion, throwing off all those restrictions, conventions. Nietzsche's saying, creating new values, it's not going to be a walk in the park. It's chaotic, intense. You got to break free from the herd.
Which leads us to another big Nietzsche idea, the transvaluation of values. Sounds kind of intimidating.
Yeah.
What exactly are we supposed to be reevaluating here?
Everything. Those deeply ingrained beliefs about good and evil, right and wrong. Nietzsche wants us to question it all. Are these values really helping us or holding us back? Take pity, for example. Nietzsche thought it weakened us, kept us from reaching our full potential.
Yeah, I saw that in the excerpts how Zarathustra pushes back against conventional ideas about pity. And he also throws some serious shade on chastity. What's the critique there?
So Nietzsche saw traditional morality, especially Christian morality, as kind of life-denying. He felt like chastity repressed our natural instincts, our creative energy. He's all about embracing life fully, which includes passion.
I can imagine that raised some eyebrows back then, tossing out centuries of moral teachings. But Nietzsche wasn't done there, was he? He throws in this mind-blowing concept of eternal recurrence.
Yeah, that one takes a minute to wrap your head around. Imagine living your life with all its ups and downs, joys and sorrows, and then doing it again and again for eternity.
Okay, whoa. In one of the excerpts, there's this scene with Zarathustra meeting a dwarf at a gateway called This Moment.
Yeah.
How does that fit into this whole eternal recurrence thing?
Think of that gateway as like the present moment, two paths stretching out infinitely. That's time eternally repeating. And the dwarf, he's that voice of doubt whispering, is this all there is?
That's both terrifying and kind of awesome, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I knew I was going to relive every mistake, every heartbreak, would I do things differently?
That's exactly the point.
Yeah.
Nietzsche wants us to ask, am I living a life I choose to repeat? A life of meaning, purpose? If not, maybe it's time to rethink some things.
It makes you really consider the weight of every choice, for sure. But even with this vision of eternity, Zarathustra doesn't seem to find many people who get him.
He really doesn't. And that isolation, feeling like no one understands, I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially anyone who's ever felt like they're thinking differently than those around them.
There are all these excerpts where Zarathustra talks about wanting to find the higher man, but everyone he meets disappoints him. He seems so lonely.
It wasn't just Zarathustra. Nietzsche himself struggled with this, feeling intellectually isolated, surrounded by people who just didn't get it. It's a painful experience.
So we have the death of God, the Superman, transvaluation of values, eternal recurrence, and poor Zarathustra wandering around looking for connection. How does this all tie back to the idea of the will to power, which comes up a lot in these excerpts?
The will to power, that's like the engine of Nietzsche's philosophy.
Yeah.
The driving force behind everything, the force that pushes us to grow, create, overcome.
But it's not just about like brute force or domination, right? There are all these quotes where Zarathustra talks about self-mastery, creativity, even love as expressions of this will.
Exactly. It's about striving to be the best version of yourself, reaching your full potential. And that's not always pretty or comfortable. It means confronting your limits, pushing past your comfort zone.
I can see that in how Zarathustra approaches his teaching. He's always challenging people, even if it makes them uncomfortable.
He's not afraid to shake things up, provoke a reaction, comfort, and complacency. Those were the enemies for Nietzsche.
And that's where art comes in, right? I notice Zarathustra talks a lot about poets, singers, dancers. Why are those figures so central to his teaching?
Because for Nietzsche, art isn't just entertainment. It's a way to challenge conventional thinking, to express those deep, sometimes uncomfortable truths that society tries to suppress.
It makes me think of Nietzsche's own writing style. It's not some dry philosophy textbook. It's full of metaphor, aphorisms, poetry. Like he's trying to wake us up, shake us out of our complacency.
Exactly. Nietzsche believed art could awaken us to new possibilities, help us see the world in a different light. It's a powerful tool for self-discovery and transformation.
And that's a pretty powerful thought to leave our listeners with. Art can be more than just something beautiful. It can be a catalyst for change, a way to push ourselves to become more.
Absolutely. And that's just one of the many insights Nietzsche offers in Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
We're just scratching the surface here, though. We'll go deeper into these ideas and how they connect to the specific excerpts you've chosen. Stay tuned. There's so much more to unpack. Okay, so we've laid some groundwork. Death of God, the Superman, reevaluating our values. But how do we actually live this stuff? Like Nietzsche's cool, but what does it mean for, Tuesday afternoon?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And these excerpts you picked, they get at that tension. On one hand, Superman striving for greatness, but then there's Zarathustra, alone in the mountains. How do those fit together?
Yeah, it's tricky. Part of me's like, be the Superman. But then I see Zarathustra off by himself, and it's like, is that the price of all this self-discovery?
It's not about escaping the world, but maybe escaping the noise of it. You chose some excerpts where Zarathustra is around people but totally alone in his head. Why'd those stand out to you?
Honestly, I think everyone's felt that way. Like, you're at a party, whatever, but no one gets it. You see things differently. It can be kind of lonely.
And Nietzsche got that. He was labeled a madman by some. His ideas were just too much for most folks. Solitude wasn't always a choice for him.
So being the Superman, does it require being a loner? Like, ditch my phone, move to a cabin in the woods?
Not necessarily a cabin, but a mental retreat, yeah. Solitude's not about physical space, it's about mental space. That quiet where you think deeply, question things, face those parts of yourself you usually avoid.
It's like Zarathustra's surrounded, but his real conversation is with himself. He's pushing his own limits, figuring things out, kind of like the Superman's training montage, mentally.
Exactly, you nail it. And that solitude, that's where the will to power gets raw, unfiltered. Not about controlling others, but mastering yourself.
Okay, solitude, check. But then we got to come back to the world, right? And Nietzsche, in these excerpts, he's not exactly Mr. Nice Guy to most people. How do we square that?
No, he was not known for sugarcoating things. But look at why Zarathustra gets frustrated. You chose those parts for a reason. What's beneath that anger?
It's harsh, but I also see hope there. Like he's pissed because people are settling, not reaching their potential. Disappointed, not disgusted.
Yes, he saw potential everywhere, that spark of the divine, he called it. But also how easily we snuff it out with fear, conformity, clinging to old, useless ideas.
So not about agreeing with everyone, but challenging them to wake up a bit, even if they get annoyed with you in the process.
Oh, for sure. Some eye rolls, maybe some shouting matches too. Nietzsche wasn't afraid of conflict. But there's a line, right? He said, whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster.
That's so relevant.
Yeah.
People getting righteous, fighting for good causes, but they turn into the thing they hate. Nietzsche would have a field day with Twitter, wouldn't he?
Oh, 100%. But back to living this, it starts with that transvaluation of values thing. What are your values? Where do they even come from?
Huh. Good question. I kind of just absorbed them, I guess.
Yeah.
Family, friends, what I saw around me. Kind of scary, but also cool to think about starting fresh.
It's not about erasing everything. More like taking inventory. Do these values fit me, help me grow, lead to a life I wouldn't mind? Well, eternally recurring.
Whoa, yeah. If I'm going to live this over and over, I better make it good. But Where do you even start with that?
It's a journey, no quick fix. But Nietzsche gave us some good maps, even if they're a little cryptic at times. Remember that line, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star?
Yes. Such a cool image. What's he getting at there, do you think?
Embrace the mess, the uncertainty, the tough stuff. That's where creativity comes from. That's how we grow. Don't shy away from it.
Like, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty with life, literally or metaphorically.
Exactly. Don't run from the hard questions, the uncomfortable truths. Experiment, screw up, learn from it. It's all part of the process.
And celebrate those dancing star moments
Yeah.
when they do come, right? Those wins, big or small.
Absolutely. Nietzsche wasn't all doom and gloom. He knew joy, laughter, the beauty of it all. But you got to go through stuff to get there.
Okay, so we've got solitude for introspection, figuring out our own values, will to power to push us, and dancing stars from the chaos. My head's spinning a bit. But where's the Superman in all this? Is that even achievable or just some ideal?
Ah, the big question. And luckily, we've got a whole nother section to tackle it and see how this wild idea of eternal recurrence might actually be the key to unlocking our full potential. Stick around, folks. It's about to get really interesting.
All right, deep breaths, everyone. We've talked about solitude, creating our own values, that will to power inside us. But now the big one, eternal recurrence, living the same life over and over, forever.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, it's kind of messing with my head.
It's a lot to process. And a lot of folks just, nope, not dealing with that. But Nietzsche, he doesn't frame it as some punishment, right? It's more like a mirror, showing us the consequences of what we're doing right now. And in the excerpts you picked, it seems like this idea really got to you. What was it about eternal recurrence that grabbed your attention?
I think it's the scale of it. Not just making the most of this life, but a life you'd want to live 1,000 times over. Every decision feels huge suddenly.
It does, yeah. No more, tomorrow's a new day, I'll do better then. Every choice echoes forever. And these excerpts you chose, Zarathustra and that dwarf, people stuck in these loops, it's like he's wrestling with this idea in real time.
So how do we deal with that? How do we make choices when the stakes are literally forever?
Tough question. Nietzsche, he's not big on easy answers, but he gives us a framework. He says, the question in each and everything, do you desire this once more and innumerable times more, would lie upon your actions as the greatest weight. So we got to look at our lives and be honest. Is this it? Is this what I want to keep doing?
Like the cosmic undo button just vanished. Is there like a checklist for an eternally repeatable life? I need something practical here.
No checklist, thankfully. It's about those big questions. The excerpts you picked, they keep coming back to authenticity, being you, truly you. Zarathustra is always pushing people to break free, right? So maybe we start there. Am I living a life that feels real? Or am I just going through the motions?
It's like that saying, don't die with your music still inside you. Except now it's don't get stuck in an eternal loop with your music still inside you. But what about the bad stuff? The heartbreak, the screw-ups? Do we just accept those too?
Remember that chaos, those dancing stars? Nietzsche, he knew suffering, pain, even messing up. It's part of being human. It's what we use to build ourselves. And Zarathustra, he's not running from that stuff.
It's like he's saying, bring it on. Let's see what amazing thing we can make out of this mess.
Yeah. It's not about pretending everything's perfect. It's knowing those dark times, they can have meaning too. They teach us, they push us to grow.
Okay, so we're embracing the chaos, being real, living with this whole eternal recurrence thing. But how does that connect to becoming the Superman? Can you even do that if it's just going to repeat forever anyway?
That's where it gets exciting. The Superman, it's not a finish line you cross. It's the direction you're heading. Constant self-improvement. And if every moment repeats, that never ends. It's this eternal dance of trying, failing, learning, growing.
So not reaching some perfect state, but always getting better, pushing harder, even though you know you'll face the same stuff again next cycle.
Yes. And that will to power we talked about, it's like the cheat code. It keeps you going, lets you embrace this eternal thing, not with fear, but with possibility.
Constantly leveling up, knowing there's always another level, another challenge, like a video game where death isn't the end, just a respawn.
Love that analogy. So if we ask Nietzsche, what's the meaning of life, with all this in mind, what would he say?
He'd probably say, figure it out yourself.
Right. Probably. But also, the meaning of life is to create meaning. You're the author, not just of this life, but of your eternity.
And using these excerpts, the ideas we've talked about, keep asking those big questions, keep pushing, even if it feels like we're going in circles.
Maybe those circles are spirals. Each time around, we're getting a little closer to something bigger.
Wow. That's actually really beautiful and a lot less terrifying than I thought eternal recurrence was going to be.
It's tough, yeah, but also incredibly freeing. No more pressure to get everything perfect this time. Embrace the journey, the ups and downs, the never-ending process of becoming.
So for our listeners out there, maybe it's not about the right answers, but the right questions. The ones that make you uncomfortable, force you to face what you want, what you fear.
Because maybe, just maybe, those questions lead us not to the Superman, but to the best us that there can be.
And in a world where everything repeats, what could be more super than that?